I'd like to call to order the September 5th, 2012 meeting of the Milton School Committee. And as is our custom, I invite you to stand as you're able and salute the flag with us. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, first order of business is our agenda for this evening. Under item 7, the fourth quarter report, we're going to put off until next meeting. So 7A, we'll scratch. And also the minutes under number 4, we have to take off. That has to be subdivided. That was a school committee meeting that was in the morning to approve some policies, but it actually lost a quorum at points, so it has to be minutes for the full school committee and a separate set of minutes for the finance subcommittee. So that's going to have to be redone. Anything else for tonight's agenda? Any additions, amendments, corrections? All right. Yes, Ms. Kelly.
I'm sorry, on the capital proposal or capital committee, correct me if I'm wrong, have we reviewed it in finance subcommittee, or are we taking it to full committee directly?
No, so that too, that's a good pickup. I think that should be moved to the 19th, and I'll contact Town Hall and ask for an extension.
Okay.
Thank you.
So it's in the packet, but we'll talk about it at finance. Thank you.
Anything else on the agenda?
We're going to leave the IB or move
I'll
on?
just mention something very briefly. All right, so hearing no other changes, we will approve the agenda as amended. Citizen speak, do we have any folks tonight? Two. All right, first, Annie Davis.
Hi, everybody. Happy to be here. Annie Davis, 39 Avalon Road, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 2. I'm here tonight to talk about Milton Reads, the townwide read that is sponsored by the Milton Public Library. The goal of Milton Reads is to foster community engagement by everyone engaging together in a cultural experience, specifically reading the same book. In other words, one book, one town. Milton Reads is based on the One Book, One Town program that originated at the Library of Congress. It's done across the country, and now it's here in Milton. The theme of Milton Reads 2012 is this: you never really know a man until you stand in his shoes and walk around in them. This is a quotation from our first selection, To Kill a Mockingbird. The Milton Reads Committee has spent many months looking for a book that would be highly accessible to everybody, a good story with strong characters, and relevant today. To Kill a Mockingbird deals with themes of understanding, growing up, poverty, bullying, race, and courage. From September 15th of this year until November 15th, Milton Reads will offer a series of programs: drop-in book groups, film showings, art activities, dramatic readings, a Halloween festival, and it all begins September 15th, Saturday, at the Milton Public Library. The last chapter of the program, our culminating event, will take place on November 15th. It will feature a conversation with U.S. Attorney Carmen Ortiz, music, a reception, and a chance to pick the book for next year. A lot of people are already reading To Kill a Mockingbird. Our library has many copies. They are all checked out right now, and they are calling in copies from throughout the network. but I wanted to own my own copy. And so I bought one for $5, which the Library Friends is selling at cost. And I brought some here this evening for those of you for whom you have never read the book. And I've heard there are some teachers who have never even read the book. Or if it's been a long time since you've read the book, I encourage you to reread it. It's a wonderful experience. It all is going to begin on September 15th. I hope we'll see you at the library. There will be art activities, a chance to buy books, to buy our bumper sticker. What would Atticus do? And a chance to really connect with a lot of people within our town through all the activities. So is there somebody who would like to buy a book tonight?
I would.
Ah, Miss Sheridan, I'm not surprised.
I have it.
You have it. It's good to own.
Having read it a long time ago, it will be good to reread. Thank you.
And for those of you who don't have $5 this evening and would like to own a copy, you can get it from the Friends. We'll be in the library lobby, and there will be a variety of places, including contacting us through email or through the website, miltonreads2012.wordpress.com. You can order the books. We'll drop it off at your house. So we look forward to seeing you September 15th in the library. There will be refreshments suitable to the period of the book, the 1930s, and to the place, Alabama. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Second, we have Jim Mulligan. Okay. All right, as we said, we put off our approval of minutes of August 28th pending some revisions, so we will move on to the superintendent's report.
Thank you,
Ms. Farmer.
Chairman Pavlicek. I'm going to move right to item B. We have with us tonight our elementary math and KA technology coordinator, Holly Concanon, and Marilyn Decker, our kindergarten through 12 science director, on a long-awaited presentation on our STEM initiative in our first grade English classes. Welcome, Marilyn and Holly. Turn it
Thank
over
you.
to Marilyn.
Hello. I'm going to wait until this queues up and then get started. I want to invite everybody, after this is over and at the end of the school committee meeting, to play around with some of the robots that I have out there. They're sensitive to an ultrasound, so you just have to wave your hand in front of it, and you'll see what the little robot does. So I want to start by going back to this summer. Remember that, when we all took vacations? And you know, my summer vacation started like a lot of yours nowadays. I got an email. No one calls me anymore. We don't even have a home phone. So I got an email from my brother-in-law in Hawaii saying, hey, there's a house we're going to swap for off the coast of Washington. You want to come? Next. And so we sent our reply. You can switch. Sent our reply.
There's a lot of emails out here.
I emailed you a lot this summer.
Got it?
Too much spam.
Technology.
You go to slide 3.
It's terrible. This happens when you're doing a presentation.
Yeah.
Go to slide 3. Or go to 4, either one's fine. There we go. So, you know, in the old days, I would get my Frommer's Guide out, but now I immediately went to Google Maps, pulled up a map of Puget Sound, I thought I might bring along 1,000 songs, maybe 100 books. And that's how I plan my vacation. Next.
Uh-oh.
You're in trouble now.
Okay, so I want you to contrast that to 10 years ago. How did you plan a vacation 10 years ago? If you were like me, you got every map you could under the sun, you looked it up in a farmer's guide, you went to the public library, and it was very different than how I planned a vacation this year. What I'd like you to think about is our first graders. What's it going to be like for them 10 years from now? What will it be like to do not only just a vacation, what it'll be like to go to the doctor, what it would be like to grow vegetables, etc. Next. So one of the things that they are going to encounter much more than all of us did when we were younger is STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. It's a really important part of the national standards and also the state standards. Engineering has been part of the Massachusetts Science Framework for quite a few years, but there's an even bigger emphasis coming with the new national standards next year. Next. No. Should go on the click.
Stuck there, Joe.
Why it's just go there.
What about just pressing enter?
Just do enter. I think it'll do it.
Just hit it, yeah.
So, okay, so last spring, a number of us went to the STEM Expo at Bridgewater State. And the reason I copied this slide was to show the vast variety of STEM activities that are out there. Bridgewater State is one of 6 centers for STEM. There were projects that had agriculture, robotics, engineering, and we got a chance to visit some of these projects. Our kids were demonstrating their robots. We also got to see some of the younger kids, and the project that we're going to talk about tonight, we actually got to see in action at the STEM Expo. One of the things we did as soon as we decided that we were going to do this STEM initiative was to contact Tufts. Tufts has a Center for Engineering, Education, and Outreach. It's an engineering center for K through 16. So when you go to the center, you will see little kids doing the type of robotics that I have over on the table tonight, and you will see graduate students and everything in between doing all sorts of interesting STEM projects. We contracted with them to do professional development for our first grade teachers. And so we spent the first 2 days of school at Tufts getting a chance to try all the different activities that are going to be part of this initiative.
So what does STEM look like in first grade? First of all, we'll be starting with many open-ended problems with many solutions, not just one. Students will use an engineering designing process, which will relate to many other curriculum areas. This, for example, could be building a wall after reading The Three Little Pigs. It would also include connecting science and math knowledge to solve a problem, and hopefully we'll find ways to connect this to social studies as well. This STEM initiative will require teamwork and creativity of all first graders.
And I've got some of the little projects. Here's a sturdy wall that the kids have to design. Now this seems trivial, but these are first graders. My design challenge is to make a wall that won't knock over, that if I give it the flick test, it stays together. Or I might do a drop test and see if it'll drop from my knees or my waist. And believe it or not, little kids, when they're designing on their own, not using a book, actually need a little help figuring this out. They practice and then they get so they can build a sturdy wall to specifications.
Other examples early in the year would include exploring pulleys and gears and also building towers. Later in the year, we will introduce motors, one of which you can see on the way out tonight. If you wave your hand in front of it, you'll see the birds move in a few different directions. So that's, you'll see there's a little eye right there, if you don't mind doing that for us. Right, you see the little Lego with there you go. So that will come later in the year, introducing sound and motors and technology that would include the computer lab or possibly laptop computers in the classroom.
And these are some of the little devices. The kids have to learn how a pulley works. They have to learn how a gear train works. And so in the beginning, they're going to get some practice just with some simple little mechanical devices.
So the process starting in first grade would be to state the problem, to generate ideas amongst themselves and with the help of the teacher, to select a solution, build the item, evaluate, present results, and possibly rebuild if necessary.
So here's a typical engineering challenge that the kids would be given. Their problem is they have to design a snow plow, and in this case in the classroom we'll have some cotton ball to represent light fluffy snow, some wet paper towels or cotton balls to represent wetter snow, and the kids have to build a motorized vehicle that can successfully move the snow. Just like real engineers, they're actually going to do some research before they start. So what do snow plows look like, and how is that going to impact their design? And then, of course, they have to brainstorm with each other and communicate to each other what are some of their ideas. Next. It's really important that they communicate what their design's going to look like. And so for early grades, what we would have the kids do is draw the picture of what they think they want to make. And of course, using whatever language skills they have at first grade, what did you draw? Write some sort of an explanation so that they can share it with their peers. And then, of course, they have to do a test. Most of the challenges that the kids are going to be given have some sort of a test that's going to be done. And after they do the test, they're not done. They go back, they look at where their design was a success and where it needs to be improved, and then redesign, and then test again. The whole idea of coming up with a fair test is something that little kids know instinctively, but it's something that engineers use over and over again. How do we test it? How do we make sure that our design is the best design for the particular challenge?
So the implementation plan for this year began the first 2 days of school, while the rest of our teachers, grades kindergarten to straight through 12th grade, were here in Milton having professional development. Our first grade teachers traveled to Tufts University for 2 days, where they had professional development provided by Tufts staff. We'll continue working with those teachers throughout the school year. There will be ongoing in-district professional development with pilot teachers to assess what went well and what needs to be improved. This program will be expanded in subsequent years, included in grades 1 through 5. So again, building upon what happens this year in grade 2. The professional development that will happen within the district will be designed and implemented by Marilyn and myself. The teachers will come together once a month in a professional learning community where all the first grade teachers will gather together to plan, to implement, to observe a model lesson, to come back together with Marilyn and myself to discuss what happened and to also plan for next activities. Here we have a sample schedule of things that will happen from September until December. Again, we are learning together. We're very excited about the professional learning community. We plan to continue to tap into Tufts University and also friends that we've made along the way at MIT and Bridgewater State College. So we're very excited about this. The grade 1 teachers had a lot of fun at Tufts, and they're also looking forward to implementing this.
I should say one thing that I didn't include in the PowerPoint. The program that we're using was actually developed at the MIT Media Center, and it was modeled after the really successful Lego Mindstorms. So Professor Resnick and others at MIT wanted to come up with something that was accessible for early elementary, and so they helped develop this program. Tufts has taken and continued to work with the program, and there are online resources, there are teacher groups and blogs where teachers actually can interact with each other from schools all around the country. Next, I think there's one more. And you can see that as we go on in the year, there's many more uses of the robots and the sensors. One of the things that small children are learning about is their own senses. And so one of the things they will learn is how the robot is able to respond to motion and design to ultrasound when you put your hand in front of it, or wiggling a sensor. So it's a nice reinforcement of the ideas that they're learning in their science classes.
In conversations with Holly and Marilyn regarding what is the traditional curriculum and what will be additional to the curriculum and how does it intertwine, it's nice to see the example of the unit of air, which is a science unit the unit of air, which is a science unit for first grade. In the blue, you have highlighted that those are the units that would be done in first grade, regardless that have been done in first grade. In the yellow, what you have is what the challenges will be in the extension of the learning will be with the STEM initiative in place at the first grade level. So we were trying to provide you with what do we do now and what will it look like differently to extend that learning and to extend the challenge in including the areas of math and engineering and technology into the extended learning for those first graders who take part in this program.
So just to follow up to that, so the air and the what is an organism is part of the present curriculum?
Yes.
So the yellow strand, which would, if you look at it long, would go across the entire school year, is what's being added.
The extension of the existing curriculum to bring the technology in the STEM.
And so how did we squeeze that in from a time perspective?
Most of the projects run anywhere from a half an hour to 45 minutes. We're thinking that right now it'll probably be one session a week. And most of the sessions also incorporate some math and also some of the literacy skills. So it won't just be an isolated event. For instance, when the teachers were talking about some of the books that they use and talking about building a sturdy wall. So you're reading Three Little Pigs or whatever it is they're learning, and then coming up with a engineering challenge that actually relates to the literature. The same identifying a problem, except identifying a problem that can be solved with engineering, is one of the things that the teachers were excited about, because they said when they first have kids learning how to read, they also have to identify what's the problem in the story. So.
We also have weekly computer lab time, and this may replace that time. Some of this work may happen in the classroom. Later in the year, it will happen in the lab, but earlier in the year, it may replace the lab time.
And just to add, the Common Core is really looking to include our science and our history and social studies in the language arts part of your day. So we're really supposed to be reading and writing about science and about social studies. So as we pilot this year and we look at the science curriculum, which really will come out in its real accurate set of standards in the spring, We're also going to look at it throughout the Common Core and ask ourselves, where can we provide more writing in science, more writing in math, more reading and writing in those areas, because that's actually what the Common Core is asking us to do. And it makes a lot of sense, because we want our students to be involved in an interdisciplinary type of activity. So the minutes, per se, as they're outlined right now in the Milton Public Schools, elementary, this many minutes for language arts, this many minutes for science, will have to be reviewed and look at how we now need to have those evolve into what the Common Core would expect our teachers to be able to do and introduce to our students, but also how it impacts the STEM initiative. I think it's a great opportunity to capitalize on this Common Core expectation of inclusiveness of all content areas.
And John, if I could just add, this project has really unified the district. The first grade teachers from all 4 elementary schools have had a great opportunity to have common planning time for 2 days together. And the amount of ideas that came out of that meeting, not just regarding STEM, was worth it. They're excited about it, they're talking to each other more, and they have formed a bond that will continue through this year, which will result in more efficient planning and instruction.
And I just want to add that I think the model of the professional development, we gave this a lot of time, watching a model lesson, not just saying, well, good luck to the 11 of you and tell us how it went, to watch Marilyn or Holly or somebody from Tufts do the lesson, discuss the lesson, debrief it, and then go back and do it in your own classes and adapt it, and to keep that model going all year. I think you've perfected that you've set up everyone to succeed, the students and the teachers.
Bagley Jones.
I think it's exciting. I think it's great. It's something that we've been talking about on and off, for a while, and I applaud the fact that you guys just sort of got up and ran with it, and that the grade 1 teachers got up and ran with it. That's a lot, especially to do in the summer, when a lot of people are supposed to be on vacation, so it's really appreciated. I did have a couple of questions. I can ask them one at a time, or however you want me to do it.
Before you ask, could I just say, I would like to commend the first grade teachers. They were very anxious about being removed from the district those first 2 days, but once they got there and got into the work, they realized that it was worth it. So they should be commended, and for being brave. This is risky for some, but they're all excited and ready.
Good point. Thank you. So on your rationale, you talk about the STEM rationale. I don't know what number slide it is, near the beginning, I think. I don't know. They're not numbered, so I don't know. It's on the second page. After what would it look like, it says STEM rationale. And you talk about the state standards, state and federal, for kids without parents in STEM professions and for later in life jobs. As a parent, I don't really care about any of those 3 things. I'm being a little provocative here. But tell me why, as a parent, I would want this for my child. I mean, I have some ideas about it, but I'm not in STEM, and I'm okay with that. I don't really care what my kid does later on in life, as long as they're happy. And yes, I care about state standards, but, I'm a parent, and I want my kid to be happy in their educational experience, especially in grade 1. Why would I put my child in this program?
Well, for me, I think it's the same reason I put my daughter in cello lessons. It's an opportunity to learn another way of thinking, another way of looking at the world. Is she going to be a cellist? I don't think so. But every time she hears an orchestra, she has a different way of listening to that orchestra. And it's the same way with STEM. Just the idea that problems are solvable if we look at it in a certain way, and the way that science, technology, engineering, and math is all so intimately linked. I want kids to know that that's another way of solving problems. So, to me it's exciting. Of course, I love that kind of stuff, but I feel the same way about why we provide a liberal education for children. It's opportunity.
And I agree. I think the mental gymnastics that students are able to engage in any kind of thinking and learning and hands-on activities is worthwhile. And we're not asking parents to put their child in this program. This is going to be part of our science program for a good amount of our folks, because our science scores need to improve. And we want to get students excited about science. We'd like to get students moving through elementary to middle and engaging kids in that area. if 100 students went through STEM and, 13 were very, very interested by high school to take on additional challenges, then that's 13 more students that were engaging in a great curriculum in science. So I see this as not something that we can afford, in a sense, not to do when we are looking to improve our science scores, improve our exposure to students in the area of all that STEM offers. I think it's good thinking. I think it's good academic rigor. And I think it will be exciting to watch it evolve through the system as students get older, through the grades. The more they're exposed to these types of learning experiences, it might change how we do business in our middle and high school science. So I think it's exciting.
And if I could just add, watching the fun and excitement that happen with our first grade teachers, if that happens with our children, it'll be worth it. But on top of that, if you look at the process of stating the problem, generating ideas, selecting the solution, building, testing, and then presenting the results, this process is going to touch upon the 21st century skills that our kids need. And I think when we think about successful businesses and companies that we see now, they're following these 6 steps that we're going to be asking these students to follow as well.
If I might to into Ms. Bagley-Jones's question, one of the veteran first grade teachers said to me after the 2 days, this is going to be good for students.
Oh, and I don't
Go right ahead.
want people to take me the wrong way. I've been asking for something like this. I think this is a great idea, but it is a choice. If my kid's going into grade 1, I'm choosing between a French immersion program and a science, math, technology program. As a parent, how do I know which program is going to be better for my child? Yes, we're going to do this. Yes, it's going to be offered in the English program, but I need to make a choice between the 2 programs. So that's what I'm looking for. When parents talk about the French immersion program, we have some research that we give them, or there are research things out there about how it impacts early cognitive development. Okay, so tell me what the research is that says this is a good idea. I mean, I have an idea. I know when there are gender studies that show girls after 7th grade, I think, stop having anything to do with math and science. I know I was an A student in science in 7th grade. 8th grade, I won't tell you what grade I got. But I clearly was part of that gender study that people have done. So I understand, but what do you think the research shows us about gender?
Some of the research, certainly on early study of science, has a definite impact. Kids make their decisions even about careers earlier than we think. Several years ago, Wellesley College did a study of early exposure to STEM, and it had a profound influence on what kids chose to do. The kind of the engagement early on was the thing that really made a significant difference. So it had to be not only, rigorous stuff, but it had to be highly engaging. So one of the things I was looking for when we were looking for, what to try is what would be highly engaging for kids.
Other questions?
But I want other people. No, Linda, you go.
I don't really have a question so much as just a reflection. I'm a huge advocate of this. I want to thank you for all your work on getting this off the ground and running, and from the superintendent's side as well. But I just want to say that to teach these skills individually is very challenging. So to try and teach engineering to a young child, I mean, you can't really teach them in isolation. And it's when you teach them together. I mean, we've had engineering as an MCAS, standard that we're supposed to be teaching, but it's been very challenging. And I think that integrating this, in addition to the process that, Holly, you touched on, really gives it so much more meaning for kids, and they'll be so much more engaged. I mean, I've just read lots of research on it, and it's very exciting that we're bringing it to Milton, so thank you.
What does Tufts have to say about sort of program outcome measures? I mean, do they look at MCAS scores over the years? Do they look at other, and I'm not, MCAS is not, I'm not saying, oh, it's all about MCAS. It's not. It's about engagement and learning and all those other things. But other districts that do this, how do they see that it's a success? Or does Tufts talk to you about what?
Actually, Tufts has a research arm in this center. Their primary focus has been how kids learn engineering concepts. it's quite a few years ago now, the National Academy did a study on how children learn science and mathematics. And so this is kind of continuing in that vein, more focused on how you learn it rather than, what the outcomes would be. It is something they're very interested in. Does early exposure, what does that do in terms of career paths, that kind of stuff. And there have been a number of studies that, as I mentioned, Wellesley, but there's other studies that have been done too.
Do you know of other districts that use it? I know there are, but
The districts around here, Cambridge, Weymouth, Boston, and I could get a list, I could get a more complete list. Nationally, it's used all over the place.
Okay, thanks.
Skelly?
Is this always done in teams, or is it individual components as well?
Usually with little ones, you want to have no more than a pair. And lots of times there are individual things that the kids would do. It's, playing together separately kind of things. So if it's something that doesn't require a lot of equipment, every kid might build their own and look at how the pulleys work. When it comes to building a car, one of the things that's challenging for first graders is, how do I put this together? How do I decide? Really the limiting factor is the materials. How much, we can't afford to have every child have their own motor, so, we're going to have them work together. But, I'm very aware of the fact that certain parts of it have to be done individually, just so they all learn, too.
And the reflection and assessment piece may be done individually.
Yeah.
Whether it's a conference with a teacher or time to draw or write, that would happen individually.
Skelly?
I thought you had mentioned that this was a sample, sort of example of what might be taught. Is this a sample or is this definitive? And if it's not definitive, when might parents or anyone expect the definitive?
I did my best at mapping out where we would be at certain times of the year. If you look, for instance, air pushes things is something that they do in their air unit. Well, that would be a good time to design a car that uses air for propulsion. But this is a pilot. One of the things that I put in the notebook that each of the teachers will get is kind of a log of each activity. How did it go? What did you think? Was it too long, too short? Give me your comments, because we want to get feedback on how it worked with our kids in their classrooms.
And we also have preliminary lessons plans that are not listed there for kids to have experience getting used to the building. We have kits for each unit, but we're also asking the community, and many have responded already, for Lego donations where kids can start to explore throughout the year, not just for these specific activities. So there are many preliminary activities that build upon vocabulary and problem solving and building.
There's, over on the table over there, I've put some of the teacher notebooks. So they have about, there's two sections. One is some preliminary, easy projects that the kids will do right off the bat, and then more complicated. And then there's also a teacher's guide that goes with the We-Do kits, which have the robots and the motors and the gears. So there's really more than would fit into a year. And one of the things that I want to make sure is that the teachers have input into what fits in best with what they're doing and what appeals also to their style.
Marilyn, will you share, I thought it was fascinating, Marilyn went with the teachers, and will you talk about the first day, how at Tufts they had them do a higher level, and the teachers kept saying, well, could we see some first grade lessons? But they had, would you explain?
Yeah, one of the things that was, they really wanted the teachers to experience what it's like to be given a challenge, to be given a more complex challenge at an adult level. And so, it threw people for a loop, like, oh my God, I don't know how to do this. Well, if you're trying to build something using gears, and I could tell you how the gears work, or I could have you try to build it, and you're much more interested in how those gears work. We had a challenge. We had to lift a heavy weight up onto the table, just using the small motor and gears. So you very quickly could see why you needed to use the gears. And one of the things that was surprising for them is it's not cheating if you talk to each other. So you could go around and talk to other groups and say, what did you do, and how did you hook that together? And, you know, having a science background, I'm used to not knowing everything. I mean, the one thing you know once you learn science is the more you know, the less you know. And so it was a nice challenge for them to see that they could learn it, they just have to focus. And initially, they were a little bit like, but they got it.
Can I just ask one more question? Oh, go ahead.
Sure. At one point, and I could be not remembering correctly, there was going to be some support from Tufts in classrooms. Is that still?
We're still in conversations with them.
Okay.
And I'm on the type of relationship where I email them and say, hey, I need help with this. Chris Rogers, who's the director of the center, actually has come to Milton just on his own to even work with a high school robotics team. Just because he likes to be around kids and likes to get kids enthusiastic. One of the things we've talked about at the high school is taking some of the high school kids and also having them go down and work with some of the first graders. The high school kids are really excited to do it, and Jess Parsons had already came to me and said, if you're doing something with STEM in the first grade, I really would love to have my kids be involved.
And to Mrs. Kelly's point, we had discussed graduate students or undergraduate students from Tufts, and Marilyn said that first they assign those students within commuting distance from Tufts, and then they're going to investigate placing students with us. And it's ironic with Miss Bagley Jones here that Dawn Jones once had music students come from the conservatory, and we paid their transit fee. And so that's one of our goals, is to have some undergraduate or graduate students come out and work with our teachers and do some demo lessons. So I said we could be creative in how to facilitate them getting in and out of town.
Sharon, you had something?
I did. I just heard Holly say that you're looking for donations of Lego, so maybe there are lots of people watching at home tonight that don't even have kids in schools anymore that have Legos at home. How can they get them to you, Holly?
Oh, that would be great. Actually, Marilyn's meeting with some parents tomorrow at the Cunningham School. We do have quite a bit already, and they'll be sorting those tomorrow to make sure we have what's appropriate for what we need. Again, we have kits specific to the projects that we're focusing on, but the more day-to-day ways to integrate this might require extra Legos that I agree with you are in the town. So we don't feel that we need to invest in them because we think there are many closets that need to be cleaned.
So elementary school offices.
Yes.
Elementary school offices, accept any
The
donations.
high school, having built way too many Lego castles with my son, I know, I finally convinced him when he went to college that he didn't need them anymore. And we actually gave them to some little kids in the neighborhood. But the kids have a tremendous amount of creativity. One of the things that they've done a lot with is even illustrate stories using Legos, and there's so many things that the kids come up with, much more creative than what I would do. But it would be helpful for us, and I can manage getting them all sorted and out to the teachers.
Thank you.
Mr. Dara?
I just was wondering if there was any talk about maybe offering something over summer enrichment that either introduces kids to some of these concepts or activities, or even extends throughout someone that might have loved that part of the day, that was their favorite part of the day. Maybe adding something in summer enrichment that would add on to that, or even, some of the after-school activities as well. I know, I think Ms. Bagley Jones had said something about, like, how do you decide what's, that would be a great way of kids learning about, or parents learning that, wow, they really enjoy this.
Right. And many of the elementary schools already offer after-school enrichment. I know at the Cunningham, there was a Lego club this year. Hopefully, this will inspire even more focused instruction during that time and more excitement from the kids. So it's definitely something that we will follow up on.
The high school robotics team ran a very successful robotics camp for 4th and 5th graders in June. It was fabulous, even if I do say so myself. The kids ran it, the kids taught it, the kids came away saying, oh my gosh, my elementary teachers are so talented. I can't believe that, they can work with so many students. We had 24 kids for 4 days, and very exciting competition at the end of the 4 days. So those are the kinds of things that, I can see working into as the program grows.
Kelly?
Is there any thought of starting it at kindergarten?
This particular program, there are programs that do start in kindergarten. This particular one, they recommend that 1st grade is a good place to start because in order for them to actually do the programming, you need to be able to kind of sequence a logical steps. The kindergarten programs tend to be more expressing yourself by building stuff with Legos.
But I guess what I would say is that it's a good place to start, just to get.
There are
the whole
opportunities
mindset.
for building now, whether with Legos or blocks, that is happening, but it is a nice idea to incorporate the Legos so the students get used to the handling and the building. So definitely something for us to consider. Even building letters with the Legos would be appropriate.
Right. And then the one other question I have is just cost. Because the last thing that we want to have happen is to have this great program be formed, and then, next year when we're looking at the budget, we're looking for cuts, and this is the place that we cut. So the effort to identify resources and make sure that it's a continuing resource is really, really important with regard to this program.
That's a priority for us. When Ms. Padera mentioned summer program, I had mentioned at this table that, one, Ms. Kelly brought to your attention that the existing units are going to be enhanced, so we target the science funds that we would be buying the kits to the Lego program, but we also use funds from community schools, because our goal is to take these materials and in an after-school program, and in the summer, use the materials, extend the day, and extend into the summer. I brought that up at another meeting. So this is going to have to be a priority. Ms. Decker is out there looking for additional funding. One of our prior superintendents, I've CC'd you on his emails. Dr. Frank Giuliano was excited about the Milton Times coverage. He networked with an associate in Alaska, and she just rang me today and emailed me that she said she's sending snail mail, a funding source for us that she's involved with for elementary school STEM, and I forwarded to Marilyn, and she's sending it out, and she said that there are funds available. So we're going to actively look, but we don't want to rely on soft money. This has to be part of the curriculum, integrated into the curriculum, and part of every single year.
The materials can be used over several grade levels. So, one of the things is every year to inventory the kits, make sure that, loose pieces are replaced, but it's not like replacing everything wholesale. The curriculum pieces are available that go all the way up through grade 5, using the same kits, and it's just the level of challenge and the difficulty. And one of the things that we will be doing this year is figuring out, okay, what do we do in grade 2? How does that, do we want to continue with the same kinds of STEM activities, or are there other ones we want to look into? We have looked in a variety of subjects, so, this has a lot of potential to go through a few grades, but there are other things that we've also looked into, so.
Bagley Jones.
A couple of questions, and then I'm done, I promise. I know the hands-on piece is just, it's so exciting and it's so great, and I know even at the high school level, the physics class, the favorite thing about the physics class is, yes, building and seeing how, a car and seeing how fast it will go and having a big competition. We all remember that. So I know that even the high school kids still love this, but this is grade 1 through 5, right? Okay, just that wasn't clear to me. And then in terms of the budget, it would be really helpful to see what the budget requirements are. I know we already have the teachers, so we're not paying any salary for additional staff. I know Tufts is providing the professional development. The kits, it's not just Legos, it's gears and other things as well. I mean, it's a very...
That's included in the kits. The kits have the motors, the gears, the sensors.
And who's paying for the kits?
We already purchased them.
That's what I said. We used our existing funds from each school and community schools with the goal is to share the materials, to extend the day, and to use them in the summer. And I'm committed to this, that I said to Ms. Decker, we're not going to share materials. I'm not going to wait for you to be done if the opportunity arises, or I'm scheduling my science time around your science time. We're committed to this. We're committed to making it work. I'll bring the next meeting a budget sheet of what it cost us, where we located and identified the funding for this year and what we plan for next year. But I'm committed to it, and I said to Ms. Decker that each teacher is to have their own kit. This isn't, we're not going to share materials for this particular initiative. We don't share reading books, or we don't share math books.
Right, we were just going to share the funding source. And when Superintendent Gormley said we're not sharing the materials, the kids in the after-school program or in the summer school program could use them because they're not interfering with the regular day program.
But just to be clear, the only cost at this point is for the materials, because we have the staff, we have the professional development, so the only cost is just like our other curriculum costs for books and materials. So that's the only cost. That's what I just want to be clear about.
I want to make myself clear to you. Their professional development was at a cost.
Oh, okay.
And so we were very fortunate in that we have a special ed grant, and one of the trainers has special ed background, and we were able to use some of our grant from that funding. It fell under the umbrella in our professional development budget in the Milton Public Schools. So no, the professional development is at a cost too.
Okay, so, and that has to be done each year for the next grade?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so that's
Well, we're
something...
lucky to have Ms. Decker. We'd have to
Right.
probably quadruple
No,
that
absolutely.
PD money if we didn't have Ms.
Absolutely.
Decker and Holly Concanon.
No, it sounds doable. I just want to be clear
No, it's good
if
to
there
put
are
what the
any
costs
questions.
are.
And then my final question, then I'm done, I promise. Since we're trying to move towards a strategic plan and looking at programs and evaluating what we're doing, in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years, what would you say is how you would determine the success or not success of this program? Like, what are you looking for to say this program is great and we want to keep this in the Milton Public Schools?
I think, well, one of the things that I will be looking for is a similar type of assessment that we do in science. The new national standards are much more explicit about engineering and STEM. The drafts of those are going to be out in the fall, and then the final version will be out in the spring. And they link the math and ELA. So, for instance, if there's an engineering standard or a science standard, it actually then says, and this is the math standard that goes with it, and this is the science standard that goes with it. So one of the things we are going to be looking for is we're going to ask kids questions about, you know, how do you approach an engineering problem? How is that different from a science problem? Some of the brainstorming, some of the, you know, the whole engineering design cycle. So we would be asking them about that, and we probably give them some sort of a problem to solve.
Okay.
I think we also hope to see improved MCAS scores, as well as increased engagement, interest, increased, I guess, a deeper level of communication skills. We're asking children at a very young age to learn how to cooperate, how to discuss, predict, make changes. So my hope is that through a process like this, by the time, they get into 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, they're very used to presenting. They're very used to addressing their peers, challenging their peers, and also interacting with adults in the same way. Many of the things we're asking children in middle and high school to do involve oral presentations, and a system like this would help children become more comfortable and confident at an earlier age.
The notebooks that I have over there, you can get an idea of what a child's engineering notebook would look like, and I think that helps you to see, what are the skills that we're looking for with little ones.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms.
Very
Deputy.
fascinating.
Thanks so much. So you're going to leave those materials back there for anyone to look at? I want to go on to, we had a very,
Sorry, can I just ask one? So 9 English teachers who are part of the professional development?
11, Marilyn, 11 teachers are involved.
11 teachers?
Well,
The co-teachers as well as whoever was teaching 1st grade in the English class, all of them went to the professional development class.
Also share the teachers in both co-child teachers, which would be about
9.
Yeah, I have 9.
9.
Holly said 11.
9 and Holly and myself. I made
Got it.
notebooks.
Okay.
Very briefly, we had a very successful opening to the school year. In your next screen packet, we'll give you resumes of our new teachers. Again, no new positions. All of the positions are filling retirements, leaves of absence or resignations, keeping in mind that we evaluate, a 4th grade teacher might become a 1st grade teacher, so that teachers are reassigned to different positions. 29 new teachers and administrators. Mr. Phelan and I will be interviewing Friday a finalist for the elementary language arts and social studies position, so we hope to bring you news of filling that position. Transportation ran rather smoothly, but we don't count anything until we're through the first week, and our kindergarten has joined us today, as did the rain, and tomorrow is election day. So Mr. Gillis reports that 1,080 students are registered for the buses. Some high school and middle buses routes are closed, and some elementary routes are filled. But you can go to the website or call Ms. Dorsey or the superintendent's office if you have any issues around transportation. Community schools, over 500 elementary school students are already signed up for before and after school programs. And again, if you go to the website and you have any issues with the before or after school, Ms. Dorsey or my office. And tomorrow afternoon, September 6th, from 7:30 to 8:30 at Milton High School, we'll have applied music lessons registrations. We've published, I won't go over them right now, but the open houses are all scheduled, and I encourage any parent in the viewing audience to attend this open house. Each teacher sets out the scope and sequence for the year, the teacher's expectations, and it's always a very positive first night for families to get into those schools and connect with their child's teacher. Athletics has begun. Practicing has been going on since August 23rd. The Collycott asked me to make a special note that they have one of their fundraisers, the Collycott Closet Sale, on September 29th. Is that a Saturday?
I think so.
Saturday? They're having a special fundraiser, and they wanted you to check that.
It is a Saturday.
Good. So we had a successful beginning to school. Our kindergarten has joined us today, tomorrow with the changes in the voting locations. The high school, Cunningham, and Tucker are now voting locations. So we've met with those principals, the Milton Police, the town clerk's office, and it's supposed to be a low turnout. I don't want to encourage any low turnout. Hopefully it'll be a high turnout, but our principals are saying that this is really going getting them in practice for the presidential election in November. So we ask for the public's cooperation tomorrow with voting day. Any questions or comments?
Ms. Kelly?
Just, do we have site council elections scheduled? Are they happening at the open houses?
Oh, that's a good question. And we have the Pierce, before our next meeting, Pierce and the high school. I'll check on that, Ms. Kelly, on the site council elections. I'll tell you that we gave all of our principals, 2 new principals and principals in new schools, the entire packet, encouraging them to have elections, encouraging people to get out, to serve in the site councils. So I'll follow up on that tomorrow and have every principal be sure that they address site councils at, when they have that captive audience there.
Great.
Because sometimes to
Thank
just
you.
read about the site council doesn't really tap the opportunity it can be to serve on a site council. That's excellent. I'll take care of that tomorrow morning. Next, these,
Can I just say something about
Absolutely.
the opening of school? It's really amazing, because what do we have, 5 principals out of 6 in either brand-new or new in their position?
4 out of 6.
Or, well, yeah, isn't it?
And it was very smooth.
Marcia? Yep, no, James is new position, Karen's a new position, Cunningham's brand new, Drew's in a new position. I
So
mean,
Janet Sheehan.
That's
and
amazing.
Marcia, and it, when everybody reflected that it was a smooth beginning, I said that's because they did so much work all summer. They outthought, and I said in my opening speech, I told a story about James Jett. Each of our principals, even if they're in new positions, they each had a meeting with every staff member. I called it Meet the Principal. And so those were good opportunities for them to get feedback about the strengths and the challenges of the building, to connect on a one-to-one with every teacher. And the feedback that the teachers and the staff provided, the principals, was very valuable. But it was a very smooth beginning. But I have to tell one story. This morning, we were at the Collycutt Cunningham, and Mr. Phelan, Mr. Gillis, and I get a lot of pleasure out of doing bus duty. It's sort of like grandparents. Children go home. Well, bus duty, we don't have to do it every day, but it's really fun at the beginning. So we were at, I probably shouldn't tell this, but we're at the Collycutt Cunningham, and Mr. Phelan comes towards me with a child, and the child looked up and, now, what school are we in front of? This won't evoke a lot of faith, but the child looked up at me and said, "I belong at the Glover." I said, "John, where did you get him?" And so he said, he got off the bus and he announced he belonged at the Glover. And he said to us, "Don't worry about this. Don't worry about this at all." And so he contacted his parents, and he got a direct line right back to the Glover. I was more panic-stricken than he was. He was in complete control. And then one more story. At the Glover, a gentleman, I hope he's not watching tonight, he said, "Lady, are you going to be here tomorrow?" And I said, "I can be." And he said, "If you're here tomorrow, I need this kindergartner to be brought inside to his kindergarten teacher. Then I can start pulling up in front." I said, "No problem. I'll be here tomorrow morning, and we'll bring that kindergartner up front." But it brings you back to, the most valuable possession and thing in the world, and it's very moving. We don't need the entire public out in front of these schools with us, but to see all of these parents and guardians and these children so excited on the first day of school. And everyone has sneakers that light up. If you don't have sneakers, you're not related to somebody who has sneakers who light up. So, you know what, it's been, we needed fun, and it was fun for us. But as I said, like grandparents, we're not going to be doing bus duty every single morning and night. But it's been fun. Moving on, I've put in your packet the process of the superintendent's evaluation. And under the chairman's report, we voted, I might remind you, at your retreat, to use the new Department of Education, Massachusetts model for superintendent's evaluation. I believe Ms. Sheridan's going to talk about a training for the school committee. John Phelan, Matt Gillis, and I will attend a training, and in anticipation of all of the teachers in Massachusetts having to, every school district has to come up with a new evaluation model that is approved by the Department of Education. And so superintendents have been encouraged to use the superintendent's model this year. And so the school committee has agreed to jump into this new model, and it's supposed to be good modeling for me to go through the process, asking the teachers to go through it next year. But putting closure on your existing policy, school committee policy, CBI, I've put in your packets a self-reflection, which that policy that you're still working under until you pass your new policy, and under increasing student achievement, strengthening the image of the Milton Public Schools, and building and advocating for the Milton Public School budget. I have outlined for you strengths and accomplishments and challenges for the coming year. I prepared this over the summer before our retreat, so I'll do an addendum. We had our customer service, our theme of working with the public, and every employee working with parents and guardians under the umbrella of customer service and improving customer service. So I'll send you an addendum to this over the next 2 weeks, and then I think you'll go into step 2 at your next meeting. But I've provided that in your packet, my reflections on last year for my performance in the Milton Public Schools.
Let me jump in here. Just to remind folks of our policy, this will be our last year under the previous superintendent evaluation process. The superintendent has given you her self-evaluation, and rather than read it, it's being distributed. I encourage people to come in next time with your reactions to this. As is required, we have to do this in open session, so we'll go around the table giving our evaluations and our impressions of the superintendent's self-reflection. And then following that, I will take all the comments made at the table by the committee and assimilate them into the final evaluation product. So it is a process that is unusual. I mean, this whole notion that every facet of the evaluation process occurs in open session is unique to school superintendents. So it's an unusual situation at best, but we will deal with it because it is the way it's done. So next week, if you'll come in with your responses to this. To Mary's self-evaluation, we will, go around the table, go through them, and then I will write up the final evaluation from those remarks.
And then simultaneously, at next meeting, we'll be really beginning the next process, so I'll be giving you goals that we talked about at the retreat for this next cycle to begin that process. But we have to go into policy, pass the policy, and have the training session. Before I turn over to Mr. Phelan on handbooks, I've provided you, Ms. Kelly had requested, I've provided you with an enrollment chart, full-day kindergarten, half-day kindergarten, our English 1 and our French 1 numbers as of August 30th. And so you had asked for demographics, so for the 19th, we'll have the demographics done for the entire elementary schools. That will be similar to the piece that we gave you in the summer, looking at each program, each grade level, each school, by gender, special education, 504, and IEP.
And with regard to that, I had a conversation with council this afternoon about what we can and cannot put in a report like that. At what point do you start to worry about giving enough information on a small enough set of data that you could actually identify a student, which is that's the legal violation right there, if somehow or other you can identify students from the data. So we had a discussion this afternoon about size of samples and so forth, and what it is we can and can't do. So I'll be talking with the superintendent about that. It may be the case that, for some Some of the demographic data, depending how fine we want to get it, we may not be able to get it that fine, because it may run afoul of FERPA laws. I mean, if you're obviously asking a question like, how many students with an individualized education plan are in a class, and the answer is 1, we can't give that answer. Because there might be a way for a parent in that class to say, oh, well, I saw so-and-so with an occupational therapist, so I know that's the special education student. So we have to be very careful about it. When you get into small numbers, it becomes an issue, because it might allow somebody, and not just, the legal standard is somebody, to identify who the student is, especially with respect to protected classes like special education students. So we have to be very careful about that. But I spent some time this afternoon with counsel on how to play that out. Ms. Kelly.
What council was that we consulted?
Paige Tobin from Murphy Lemire, particularly the person who does some of our special education. So spent some time on the phone this afternoon.
And before I turn this over to Mr. Phelan, in the green folder, I often give you information that has happened in between meetings, newspaper articles that might be of interest to you, letters that we receive. In this packet, the Department of Education asked that every school district come up with policies around emergency protocols. Ms. Sheridan, that's what two policies that you worked hard to get passed by the deadline from the Department of Education. And what I've put in your packet that we don't really distribute to the public is our crisis manual. And so this crisis manual, I want to thank Mr. Gillis, Margaret Gibbons, our head nurse, and Steve Traster, working with Leroy Walker and Linda Lee Sheridan, getting this really to meet the state's requirements. But it was very encouraging to me that our work over the years, that this was in really, really good shape. And so what we do, Jack Richmond from the Milton Police Department meets with our administrators and then goes to every one of our schools and goes over all of our policies and procedures, our lockdown procedures, and then I want to remind the public that when many of us grew up, we went through fire drills. And now in our schools across Massachusetts and the country, we go through lockdown drills. And so we communicate with families and parents and guardians to let parents know when that's going to happen, or sometimes we have a drill and we don't get everyone ready, but simultaneously parents will send out a blast to every parent so that they'll be aware. But I was very encouraged, and again, I put this in your packet. We don't put this out on the web because it's how we handle situations. And one quick note, we have a family at the Glover School, the Lordens, and Tucker School, the Lordens, and they donated to the Milton Public School a piece of software, Be Safe. And again, this would have been at great cost to the district, and it's an aerial view and detail where every room is in each of our schools. And I'll tell you, before we were able to use this piece of software, we once had to just take blueprints out on the back of a police car, and they were describing to us during a drill which rooms they wanted to go into. But again, this piece of software from the Lordens, used by many districts at great expense, has enabled us to facilitate so that secretaries have this at their fingertips if there is an emergency. So, thank you very much. So that's in your green folder.
I'd just like to add my thanks, Ms. Gormley, to Mr. Gillis and Margaret Gibbons and Steve Traster and the Milton Police Department. This timeline was much shorter than had been told to us originally, and really took an all-hands-on-deck approach, and we got it done. So like you said, we were in very good shape in terms of our safety and our protocols, but just tweaking it to the language and the way that the state Department of Elementary and Secondary Education wanted took time, and so we appreciate all those efforts to getting it done. Thank you.
Well, in the spirit of oversharing here, there was a lot of conversation among superintendents that this was a very short deadline, and but as I said in the office today, the deadline should have been before school started, because you want that information done and in the hands you know, an emergency is not going to wait until an extended deadline to the end of September. So the Department of Education was right. Again, you only had a few issues to update, and there's lots of conversation around the state about it, but ours is in place and in the hands of the individuals who need it. Mr. Phelan on handbooks?
Sure. On behalf of the teachers and the principals, we want to make sure that all of our parents are aware that we're sending a lot of information home to each of the houses around course descriptions and syllabi and expectations for the school year that are all academic related, but we're also sending home emergency cards that are important to fill out so our nursing and office staff have the most updated information. We also will be sending home, or have sent home, student handbooks at every level. At the elementary level, the student handbook is in two parts. One is a school-specific portion of the handbook that outlines the rooms and the expectations for that particular school, and there's a centralized handbook that handles all of our policies and expectations that are district-wide. The middle and high school also have handbooks that have all the general policies that are available to that students and staff and our parents should know and understand. And importantly, there's a sign-off sheet that we ask every parent to sign off that they have received this information at the back of each handbook. So we encourage our families to fill out those forms and sign those notifications and send them back to their homeroom teachers, as they are important for the school year to begin in a safe and orderly way. If you have not received that handbook or didn't make it home in the book bag, which happens once in a while in middle school, each school has their student handbook on the web on their school-based site under additional links. It will just say at Pierce, the Pierce handbook, Glover, the Glover handbook, etc. So all that stuff is available to each parent on the web as well.
If I might, Mr. Phelan and our attorney do a tremendous amount of work on all your school committee policies that apply to families and students, updating those handbooks every year, making sure that they meet all of the regulations. So those really works, and I was going to make copies, but then everyone said to me, well, everybody can go to the web and see them. But the schools do a tremendous amount of work getting all those signature pages back to be sure that every family has gone over those handbooks with their children.
Ms. Kelly?
So do we have student handbooks in different languages?
We have handbooks that are available in 2 other languages that we provide to the identified families that we work with in those languages. We have an ELL coordinator and ELL teachers in the district, and we have a list of each student in our schools that does not have English as their first language, and we have students and families identified in our schools that even though the student may have English as their first or usable language, that their family does not. So they're identified, and those are handed to them in their language. The 2 languages that we provide, if there's a language that we don't, we have access to a group, a software group that we can go online and ask for the handbook to be translated as part of our service to their service to us as a district.
Great, thank you.
Dr. Jones?
Does the school committee approve the handbooks, or are they just done each year?
They are relatively the same each year, with any kind of a policy change that may be related to a school. They are relatively the same each year, except for the facts of phone numbers, staff, etc. If there were any major changes to a handbook regarding discipline or any major piece that was policy related, I think that would be brought to your attention. I do not believe anything like that has been altered or edited.
The only reason I asked is that some high school students were complaining to me about a policy and asked, well, didn't you approve it? And I was like, I don't know. So I thought I should know. They were asking about it. So it may have been approved by school committee a while ago, but I personally was not responsible for it. Okay, just checking.
Ms. Kelly?
I think student handbooks are policy, and I think it would be great to put it into our calendar. I don't know what the time frame is for each individual school to pull together, but I think it should be put on our agenda. Additionally, things like even with principal switches, I think there was an issue around whether students could eat in between, outside of lunch period, and I don't know whether that has been changed, but one would think that would be presented in the student handbook as well. So those types of things I think are great to bring before the school committee so that not only we're informed.
That was the complaint.
Exactly, when someone brings up an issue, but it's just, I think, a good matter of process.
We'll put that, we usually have those printed right at, they're going right till the end of August, so we'll put that on the end of July agenda for approval by the school committee. Well, mid-July, so that then we can make edits.
Great.
Anything
Thank
else? All right, under my report, just a couple things briefly. You were again given copies of the model system for superintendent's evaluation. Now, our next regularly scheduled school committee meeting is two weeks from tonight, the 19th. Ms. Sheridan has arranged with Glenn Kuchar, the executive director of the Mass Association of School Committees, to come the previous night, the 18th, for a session on the superintendent's evaluation process, the new process. That will be an open meeting. It won't be on TV, but it'll just be, we're not doing any business at it. It's just a presentation on how the new superintendent's evaluation will work. So it will be posted. People are obviously welcome to attend, but that will be its sole purpose, is the, and that will be in the superintendent's conference room.
In time.
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock. And run about an hour and a half, you said, unless we have a lot of questions. It could go up to 2 hours.
So it will be 2 nights that week, the 18th, the Tuesday and the Wednesday. So again, copies were distributed to you in the email. It's all online. I mean, actually, what the only 78 pages you got, or whatever it was here, is only part of it, actually. There's even more online, so enjoy. We do have to take a vote for the Mass Association of School Committees annual meeting, where we usually appoint a delegate to represent us at the meeting, at the joint conference. It's November 7th through 10th. It, once again, is at Hyannis, where it is seemingly held every year, or at least every year that I can remember. So I would entertain a motion to appoint a representative.
Can we have a volunteer?
Do we have any
I
volunteers?
nominate Becky.
I second it.
I volunteer. Thank you.
It was, Ms. Sheridan nominated Ms. Padera to go. Ms. Padera had indicated she wouldn't run in terror if we appointed her. She's interested in going.
And it really is a great
It
time.
really is.
Unfortunately, it's during the week, and, you know, some of our work schedules conflict with that, so thank you for taking
Ms.
that.
Kelly?
So is the expectation that you would attend every single day, or in years past, haven't we only attended like 2 days? Is this
Well-
more days than usual?
No, it isn't, actually. It's a different schedule, though. In the past, I know when I've gone, I've tended to go to the business meeting, which was on a Wednesday,
Right.
because I could make a Wednesday afternoon, but they would also have a Thursday to Friday and a Saturday morning, and generally speaking, I couldn't take that much time to go be there. So, you know, in the past when I've gone to the business session. It's not required, but of course, there's a lot of really interesting stuff at the meeting.
good.
And to the extent that people can go and spend more than an afternoon, I think is great. You know, in the past, as I said, when I've gone, I just haven't been able to devote 3 days to it. So we have a motion
Yes, thank you.
and a
Becky.
second to appoint Ms. Padera as our representative. Any further comments? Hearing none, all those in favor? It is unanimous. All right. You were also sent in the email some information about strategic planning. It was brought up in a couple of our last meetings to look at the process of creating a strategic plan for the district. The one we have is older. And the superintendent has done a little bit of a investigation with some other people from the Mass Association of School Superintendents, and came up with a couple possibilities and sent us some information on it. I think one of the pieces, rather than go through that right now, you can read them, they're not short. but you can see the sorts of things they propose. I would point out that based on the informal quote from at least one of them in here, we are talking potentially in the $15,000 to $20,000 range to do this, which means a source of funding, if we want to do this, is going to have to be identified. And we are at a cost factor that is going to involve, Massachusetts bid laws. We're not at 25,000. We won't have to do a full request and a full closed bid, sealed bid process, but we will have to do. It is not a trivial expenditure, and there are aspects of Chapter 30B that we will have to follow to do this. So it is not just give me a quote, we'll choose who we like. This is more involved than that. So there is, and this sort of a consultant does fall under the purview of 30B and the bid laws. So I invite you to read this stuff over and take a look at it. And if it is something that we want to do, we are going to have to, as I say, identify a source of funding, because it's not trivial.
So I'm just looking to clarify what the timeline for that would be. Obviously, we don't have the funding in this year's budget, but is it something that we can charge the finance subcommittee to look for next year, or, it would come out of next year's budget? Is that correct, or?
Yeah, I think this is important enough that we need to find the resources. So I would say it's like a two-track approach. We start on the path to find funding, at the same time start talking about what's required to put out a bid to try and get this in place. That's my opinion anyways.
And to that point, I think that I put it on the agenda for our finance subcommittee to talk about a funding source, and I had also brainstormed at our retreat that we have a very talented parent and citizen group in the town of Milton, and if we started to talk about a strategic planning, that there might be somebody, a community member who has that expertise, who might want to pro bono work with us on a strategic plan. So to Ms. Kelly's point, running 3 different avenues, I just gave you a sampling from when I called the head of my professional group. He gave me 2 names that have been used, and I also called the Sharon superintendent. They just went through a process, and so we'll put it on the finance subcommittee, Ms. Kelly, and I didn't know if we had someone in the viewing audience who might have an expertise in strategic planning.
All right. First grade assignment policy, this is one that is staying on our agenda until we deal with it. We don't have a proposal in any more detail than we've had tonight, but I decided to leave this on the agenda in case people want to say anything more on it as we go on a weekly basis. But we do have to come to an agreement sooner rather than later as to where exactly we are going with this. The superintendent has made a recommendation that a capping process is necessary to avoid repeats of situations like this year. We do have to do some work as to what that could possibly look like. It's one thing to say cap. It's another thing to actually put it together in some fashion that is fair and equitable and makes sense. So we've got to do some work on that. We don't have as I say, a proposal in front of us tonight. Ms. Kelly.
Just, it seems to me we need a plan, and I think we need to drive the plan. If everyone's in agreement that everyone would agree to a cap, then the obvious next step would be, okay, what does that cap look like? But I don't know that we've had a consensus of this committee that says everyone's agreeing that a cap is necessary. So there are decision points that I think need to be put to a plan so that we can keep, to your point, every week it should be on here that we have a meeting, and we should be making progress. But at this point, I'm a little, I don't know where we stand. So I think getting some direction, by creating a plan would be important. I don't know how anybody else feels, but.
We're going to have to, yes, sit down and deal with some of the issues about what something like that would look like. I mean, for instance, the school with 4 first grades, and another school with 3 first grades, does that mean that one school you have a smaller percentage chance of getting into the program of your choice than another school? I mean, these are very difficult things to deal with in order to get it in a way that makes some sense. So we are going to have a draft of something out here that we can talk about, because I think just talking in the abstract is not going to get us where we need to get.
So I guess I would ask, do people need to see what the plan might look like, or options of a plan, before they can make the decision to agree that capping French immersion is the way the system is moving forward? I guess I asked my fellow members as to where they're at with that. Because if that's necessary, I mean, we can take one step tonight if everyone's in agreement that says, yeah, we do need a cap. Okay, so that goes out by the wayside, and then we go on to the next steps. What are the different options of capping that we might explore?
I would suggest that we not have an in-depth discussion about it tonight, because Mr. Walker isn't here with us
No,
to
I agree.
contribute, so.
But what I'm saying is, we need a framework
Exactly.
around which to move this process forward. And I don't know, does that lie with us? Should we ask the administration to come up with a timeline and decision tree in terms of how we move this process forward? Or we can bring it to the finance subcommittee, however we want to move, but right now, it seems like we're treading water. I appreciate, I have asked for the demographics for the elementary. I think that will help me try and figure out what I would love to see as a way to cap. Because to me, we don't solve our problems just by numbers of kids in classrooms. It has to go deeper than that. That's the way I'm looking at this, and that's why I'm asking for the demographic information. And given the information that you've given about legal advice around this, we may need to have further discussions about that. But at this point, and I appreciate that we don't have that information available, so I don't know that I would be able to offer any, put any proposal on the table until I see that. But it seems to me we need to know what we need to know so that we can make decisions in a timely manner.
My intent is to sit down with the superintendent once we have the demographic information, go over it before it gets released, just to make sure we comport with all our requirements. And I agree that, given that, we're in a better position to start to say what might be some possibilities. I'm loath to say just personally cap, because that means 93 different things to 93 different people. And I think we need some more specificity, and we need some more detail about what that is, because I can foresee that, some people say, well, I'm in favor of capping the program, but not that way, or, and so forth. I think it requires more detail before I'm personally ready to sign off on one version or another.
Do you mean people in the community, Glenn, or us?
Ultimately lies with us.
That's what I think that was my point.
And we're getting
We know people
shortage
aren't gonna
of
like
opinions
it.
from people, which
That's
is
right.
fine.
That's
But
right.
I think, I think we need something that we and people can react to.
Right, I agree.
Rather than people saying, well, it isn't fair if you're going to, because you're going to do this, and we're saying, who said we're going to do that? I mean, personally, I have no intention of doing that, so I think we need to frame the discussion a little better than we have it right now. I think we're far too nebulous
Thank you.
in order to have a rational discussion about how this would look. Yes.
So if we think about backward planning and the deadlines that we have naturally in place for us, we know that kindergarten, first grade night is the end of January, is that correct? So, we should use that as a backward plan, and maybe we could ask the leadership team to come up with a suggestion in terms of what those multiple deadlines could look like for us, and present that at our next meeting for us to discuss.
Yeah, I would argue that we need information to make this, but I would not want to push it up against January. I think we need to have the information necessary to make a good decision, but then we need to make that decision. I think there needs to be some good time, because I think many people, if nothing else, people have said, if you are going to make that decision at camp, please make it early so that I and my family can make decisions as they see fit. So I would not want to back up against.
You're saying
the January
next week?
timeline.
The next meeting, you want that data? No.
Right. I said we would begin the process, so we'd ask the superintendent and her leadership team for a recommendation of a plan, of a timeline of
Right.
when that could be done, knowing that the end game is January, backward planning.
Right. And can I add to that? And I know it's a lot of work, especially if we're talking in 2 weeks, which I think is a really good plan. I mean, we have to start this more formally ASAP, which is what you both are saying, but, you know, how the world language did the pros and cons, or, you know, there's some detail about it. I know that's an awful lot of work to do, but we want to make informed decisions from you guys, from you, the administrative team, to say, here's our recommendation, but here's why, and just some, because you're in the leadership role, so you need to share with us your expert opinion about why we, you know, some of the options are.
We hadn't discussed this, but to just start the discussion, I could meet with the leadership team and come up with 1, 2, 3 proposals, their best thoughts around this.
That would be great.
And then you can look at them and decide, again, pros and cons. So if I meet with the leadership team and bring forward, because we haven't thought about that, I'll be honest with you. We didn't go further than the capping. So if I met with the leadership team and we came up with 2 or 3 proposals, plus the timeline, and get the information out to you for the next meeting.
Ms. Kelly?
Just, I think we need to drill down a little bit to say, what is the capping intended to do? What's the goal of capping? And I think if we don't get to that level of detail, the plans that are going to come out are not necessarily going to meet the need. So you've come out with a recommendation to say we need to cap. Why do we need to cap? What do we need to achieve in the cap that will ultimately result in what's desired for the school system?
So those would be precursors to recommendations.
Right, yep.
I think Mr. Phelan has a question.
No, I just feel that the presentation that we made in June, along with the preliminary recommendation, and then the subsequent presentation by Dr. O'Dwyer, along with the information and some of the pros and cons and the reasons why, was a substantial amount of information. So after reviewing that, if there's anything additional to that that you think that we need to do, or summarizing of that information, that's perfectly. I'm confused by the request because I thought we already made a recommendation, and I thought we already did provide what we feel the reasons why we needed to have the class sizes balanced and the programs balanced to provide appropriate class dynamics in every grade.
Right. And I appreciate that. I'm not sure that everyone got that message out of the presentations that were presented.
Okay.
And therefore, if you restate the reason that we're doing what we're doing, I think that helps the process, the education process. But additionally, the recommendation was we need to cap. Now we need specificity around what do we mean by capping? Is it just total number of students? To your point, in a particular school, to what level of detail? And again, I would argue that to fix what we believe is the real problem, which is the demographics in our classes are totally unbalanced, and to achieve educational excellence, we need more balance, that a capping system is going to have to take that into consideration. Mm-hmm. That would be and that's why having the detail around the demographics of not only the grade 5, but from K to 5 is important.
Sarah?
Yeah, I think it's, Ms. Kelly was saying that I think we're looking for more specifics on what you think that would look like. Because, you know, some people might be saying, yeah, we definitely can't go over 60% or 75%, what would that look like? But, you know, to get a better idea and plan, and also parents would know what that would look like. But what I was going to say before that is that if you're I think bringing up a couple different options is a really good one, and presenting it in a way of like the pros and cons of each option, and perhaps maybe you have one that you feel is the best option for what reason. Do you know what I mean? Like the pros and cons. As Ms. Kelly was saying, you know, if your goal is to, you know, diversify classes, but at the same time, if that might not be doable, you know, so you have to put out the pros and cons and maybe put your recommendations forth, which one you think is better because, I don't know. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I would agree. So, next step.
The IB update is even faster. I've spoken to a couple people about this issue of primary school IB. I now have a contact with someone at the International Baccalaureate Group who's a primary specialist. I'm going to get in touch with them. The folks I've talked to, people who've spoken here at Citizen Speak and others who know about it, are, like myself, more aware of IB at the International Baccalaureate at the high school level and much less aware of it at the primary level. So I actually had to get the name of somebody who is in the primary division. And so I'm going to give a call and see what we can find out about that. So that's still active, but not right on the front burner at the moment until we get some of the issues resolved about whether, in fact, is even applicable to our scenario.
Thanks. May I bring up one item before we go on? I want to bring you back to the Jewish holidays. And you might remember that the administration met with Rabbi Benjamin from Temple Shalom last year, and different school districts have different Jewish holidays off. And what we decided upon last year, I think it was actually voted at the school committee, or recommended by me, that when Yom Kippur is a school day, we would have Yom Kippur off. But if Yom Kippur was ever on a Saturday or Sunday, we would have one of the days of Rosh Hashanah. And so I want to be very, very sensitive to the Jewish holidays, and us, we who grew up in this community, understand, as everyone should, the importance of these holidays and respecting not having public meetings around the Jewish holidays. And so I made a mistake, and we scheduled the Collycott PTO on the night of the end of Rosh Hashanah. So we changed that night because families gather at the end of the Jewish holiday. And I'm afraid that the night, that's the 18th. And so this is a public meeting, so I would urge you not to have that on the night of the 18th. Because I've been speaking to several parents in the community, and where that is a public meeting that somebody might want to attend, we're just being sensitive of that. We're sensitive with all of our athletic games and the communities that we work with. So we might have to reschedule that. So I had to change the Collycott, and that was my mistake, open house, to not have it on the night of the 18th. So for the viewing public, we have the 26th off, which is Yom Kippur. But we're being very, very sensitive of the Jewish holidays beginning at sundown and the night that they end, with families gathering together, not to have public meetings that night. So I'm sorry, because you ran that date by me, and I had made the mistake.
That's fine. Can I just
Call it
check
that.
in with everyone right now? Or do people know if they're available on the 20th? That had been our other date. It's Thursday the 20th.
That's if anyone has a child at Tucker or Cunningham, that's their open house, but I don't think anyone does have a child at Tucker or
I'll
Cunningham.
check with Mr. Walker, and then,
Mr. Kuchar.
yeah.
All right, we'll see what we can do.
We might be going into October.
We might have
which
to
is
poll
gonna
you again
change our,
for another date.
But the 19th is okay.
19th is us.
Regular meeting.
And that's okay?
Yes, yes.
Just the 18th isn't.
But I'd urge you not to have that night, that public meeting on that night of the 18th.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'll contact him.
I have nothing else under my report. We actually X'd out both things on the Finance Subcommittee report. Ms. Pillai, do you have anything else you'd like to? All right. Citizens Speak topic response. Anything from prior night's Citizen Speaks? Seeing none. Next meeting agenda items. We just talked about a little bit of that with the first grade. Next meeting, we also have, we mentioned we have the superintendent's goals. Step 2 of that process. We have a presentation on student achievement, MCAS, AYP.
Well, the MCAS won't be public, so if we might, Mr. Pelichick, we're going to add our are coming forward with a capping presentation.
Okay, so we'll move that
And
over.
I think Mr. Phelan had thought he would do, oh, and it's the high school time presentation. The time subcommittee recommendation.
Yes, Ms.
I'll
Carey.
be late for that meeting, just, if
Okay.
you're going to take a vote on that. If you could put it towards the end of the agenda, that would be greatly appreciated.
Fine.
Thank you.
Anything else for future meetings? Yes, Ms. Kelly.
Just to go back to Ms. Gormay's last statement, is the expectation to have the recommendations for our next meeting or the timeline around which we will get recommendations? Because I think we talked about it two different ways.
Thank you, because I was feeling confused after that exchange. I think that we need to provide a timeline of what we, as a group, and then I think we mentioned at this board, the last meeting, is that it was hard for the administration to provide the school committee a timeline that you have to do your work in, because we're not in charge of the school committee's agenda in that sense. So, and I also think that in a week and a half, it would be difficult to get airtight options around what capping and the details of what capping would look like. So I would suggest that we provide the demographic data of the elementary as requested, and begin to talk about what the next steps would be, with a timeline of this being, quote, decided and/or next steps being through October, and hopefully being voted upon in X amount of meetings that would lead prior to Thanksgiving. I do think that my opinion would be, if the superintendent would allow, is that we would need to take some substantial time to find out what options would look like, that we investigate every part of each option, because there's a lot of small detail that would matter greatly in certain circumstances, as we've learned in our student assignment policy that we already have, that you really want to take every situation into consideration when you make a proposal. So would it be appropriate to say that we'll provide that demographic information for the 19th and go from there? Is that?
And the timeline, and we'll start to work with the leadership team to, my feeling was, when we started to talk about it, that we wouldn't make just one recommendation to you. We would make 2 or 3 recommendations that, let's brainstorm, that you might then make adaptations to and come out with what you want. But if we sit as a leadership team and take all of the emails and the comments that we've received and note the different items that have been brought up by the public and bring proposals to you. So I'll set up meetings with the leadership team. So let's agree upon this. A timeline, the demographics at the next meeting, and I'll set up a schedule with the leadership team.
Great.
And then we have the high school time subcommittee coming.
Right. That's busy enough. Citizen speak. Mr. Mulligan had asked to defer, and he's all set. All right, so anyone else for our second citizen speak? Yes. Just give us, I'll write you down if you just give your name and address.
My name is
Yes, please.
my name is Nathan Sitkoff, Sitkoff, and I live at 18 Grove Street. I have a son who started kindergarten at Tucker School yesterday. My wife and I are pondering exactly the question that Ms. Bagley-Jones raised during the presentation of the STEM program presentation earlier. And while I appreciate the effort that teachers have clearly put into the program and the thought that's gone into it, I must say that based on what I saw this evening, I feel disappointed that what's being about the offering, in particular that the time that and resources in general that will be dedicated to the program will come out of other science and math programming, and therefore it doesn't really feel to me as if it's an additive programming, but rather a substitutive programming for existing time and existing resources. I also don't feel like it's been planned out well beyond the first year, which doesn't fill me with confidence that it will be carried forward. So those are just some concerns of mine. I would proffer that if time needs to be added and time needs to be taken away from another program, perhaps the Spanish program should be considered instead of taking time out of the computer program, which is an existing science and technology program. And again, that's a substitutive, not an additive in my mind. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The last item on our agenda is an executive session. Just in case people are wondering why it's this way, the Consolidated Facilities Director, although not our employee, does report to the superintendent as well as the town administrator. And as his contract is up for renewal every year, town council has opined that we should review the contract as well, in fact, be signatories to it as well. So I would entertain a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of contract negotiations with the Consolidated Facilities Director, not to return to open session, but to adjourn directly from executive session.
So moved. Second?
So moved by Ms. Sheridan, seconded by Ms. Kelly. This requires a roll call vote. Ms. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Bagley-Jones?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Ms. Sheridan?
Yes.
Mr. Darius?
Yes.
Thank you very much.